Welcome to the second episode of this 7-part series on the history of the Great Kingdom of Buganda.
Njagala Kasai means I need blood. Yeah, I need blood. Yeah. When you hear it just openly, it sounds...
It's very eerie and scary.
yeah. It is even scaring, but it has its hidden meaning.
This world is being led by the dead. This world is being led by the dead.
Yeah, in Africa, actually, we almost had similar beliefs. Kings could be buried with a lot of items, to the extent even they were buried with servants.
Ah.
Yes. Now, when it comes to Buganda...
People are buried alive?
Yes, yeah. Actually, it was a pleasure to bury with the king.
Era nze nsanyukira ddala kubanga ekyamazima zaali ssaawa 2 ennaku z'omwezi 16 omwezi ogwokusatu.
You're dealing with the living, you're dealing with the dead. In the process of rebuilding, I have had to deal with history. I've had to deal with the future.
Engamba yi, ani ayo kizze ebisaaniiko ekiro kino okumpi n'ennyumba n'entuukayo mu mazima nasanga ennyumba yeekutte.
Depends on what we appreciate as our own. For this is Kasubi Tombs. It's your own, it's ours, it's Ugandan.
N'enkuba enduulu naye abali munda nga tebawulira n'ennyingirira ddala ne mbagamba banaye mufulume.
Ensonga lwaki bw'olaba ennyumba Muzibwazaalampanga eyakwata omuliro mu 2010 bwe tubali tugizzaawo nga bwe yali.
Naye kale mpulira essanyu kubanga kati njirabako kubanga luli nagakaaba ne ŋŋamba yi nga tufudde ekitiibwa ky'Obuganda okuggwaawo.
Mu lubiri tebavugiramu ggaali, temukookolimirwamu nkoko empanga kuba Sseggwanga ali atya, ali omu ye kabaka.
Missionaries came preaching Jesus Christ as the king.
Yeah.
And we had kings here. We could say, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, let your kingdom come. We had kingdoms here.
Our ancestors cannot be satanic, no. They once lived like us. If you say they are satanic, then when you also die, you will become satanic.
In this second segment is an exclusive with the chief architect leading the palace restoration. It's important that you watch the whole series for context. Although we had intended to produce this series in vernacular, to reach as many people as possible, these Buganda tapes are presented in English. Any factual corrections will be addressed in a pinned comment. The conversation begins right now. Welcome to the Buganda series. I'm your host, Jonathan Benaya. Now, I must state that there will be segments in this series that include comments that are made in vernacular, or call it Luganda. So if you're listening to this in audio form and would like a translation, I've left a link down below in the notes where you can access a video form, a video version of this whole series, and there you'll have subtitles for the Luganda translations. But if you understand Luganda, then I guess you can access the series wherever you prefer. All right, let's get right in.
Okay, so Mr. Nsubuga, heritage, we understand, isn't just static. It's created and it evolves over time. But I understand the task that you had of restoring this beautiful house called Muzibwazaalampanga. It's taken 15 years. It's taken a while. I'd like to know, what has this journey been like for yourself and the team you've worked with?
Well, initially, at the start, when the house caught fire, when it was gutted, everybody thought that this house would take us 1 year, 2 years, if not less. And my background in interior design and architecture, I realized that it wouldn't take that short time. So I was ready for the long haul, but not 15 years. I knew maybe 5. But obviously, due to the fact of getting historic materials and knowing what to rebuild, and also the pressure from the community to rebuild quickly, it became a very, very complex project. And that involved social, economic, political, cultural. And along the way, I learned quite a lot about myself and also about my culture in general.
Okay, interesting. Later on, I'll want to know what those lessons have been. But I'd like to understand the complexity of this task, setting up or restoring Kasubi. I know, unlike museums as we know them, you get artifacts from, if I could call it, the context of where they are made, and you take them to a museum and you have to recontextualize them. But for the case of Kasubi, I understand it's a living heritage. It's an active site, if I could use that as a phrase. Has it been challenging for you to reconcile the many layers of history, tradition, rituals as you've gone along this restoration process?
It's been exciting. That's number one. And as you introduce your question, Kasubi is a living site. Nobody wakes up in the morning and they dress up like, let's say, like Molamba or Nsubuga, the gods. People die here, people get sick, and there's no performance. It's an actual ongoing. It's an evolution. It's an ongoing, and the different layers of the property, physically and also spiritually, do come out. They do come out, and you begin to appreciate that you're dealing with the living, you're dealing with the dead. And in fact, I coined a phrase, I dream of tomorrow for a better yesterday today. Because in the process of rebuilding, I have had to deal with history. I've had to deal with the future. I've had to deal with what the Baganda call Masengere. I've had to deal with the judges, the different elders. I've had to deal with mediums, the Congos, the carriers of the past Kabakas. And in the process, you begin to realize that what you're sorting out, what you're dealing with, is a life. It's like a cloud. It's in a cloud, and you keep going to the cloud and you bring out what you need. You deal with situations going back. For instance, at Kasubi, you've got 4 Kabakas lying in here. And each Kabaka, the Baganda call it a banja. They have a debt, or they have something they didn't do, or something that they didn't complete. And these things follow the next Kabaka, the next Kabaka, the next Kabaka. So you begin to deal with the 4 Kabakas here, you begin to realize that they're connected. For instance, Sekabaka soon at Wamala. And you start going to Nachibinge, you start going to all these past Kabakas to inform, to get things done and sorted out. So the layers are very, very many, the complexities are there. And of course now you begin to, like I mentioned at one point, the last group of people who worked on Mzibazala and Panga, that was in 1938.
Yes.
None of them are alive now.
That's during the
Sekabaka Daudi Chwa's reign. And he's the one who modernized this building. And so you begin to realize that where does this information and knowledge come from? You need to look for it. If you can't look for it, you go and sit in what they call the Masengere, the Ruchiko, in Chiko. You go to the past elders, the past Kabakas. You ask questions. And, for instance, I remember I asked a question about the number of poles in this building. I said, how come there, I think about 40-something. And immediately in that meeting, I was told the Bataka who are around that time, they're the ones who brought those poles. So now they begin to get an answer. So that these poles were brought by such a number of Bataka clan leaders. And also what kind of timber do we use? You get, you get given, they give you insight in what your materials you need to do and all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in when you said you are consulting with the kings. We understand that the kings in Buganda disappear, they do not die. But yes, they disappeared. So I'm trying to understand, how then are you consulting with them?
That's a very interesting question, and that's what brings the Uganda culture, African culture in particular, Baganda. Baganda don't die. Baganda kept alive by fire, by choto, keeps you alive. And if you look at the processes of last funeral rites, or kwabi olumbe, it's all about keeping that person alive. It's all about appeasing the ghost. It's all about the next generation coming in. So when you say that I spoke to, let's say, Kabaka Daudi Chua, it's odd for somebody else. But if his medium is present, and this is now very complicated, you need to prove that's the real medium, and you ask specific questions, and they give you guidance. And for instance, the owner of this house is Sekabaka Mutesa 1, Mukabia, and he's got a medium. So you sit down with that medium and you talk and you get insight, you get advice, you get warnings. So it is, it's hard to explain because I'm not at liberty to
I know, I understand.
to reveal everything that I've done, but it is something which, when I present it to other communities, to foreign communities, I find actually Japanese understand it very quickly.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, very, very quickly.
Do they have similar?
Well, they might have, but we keep our people alive. You got the mediums, you got the balongo, the twin of each king has got a twin. The twin is left behind. African culture that says oral. How do you keep the oral history? Is it authentic? It's authentic. Why? Because each king in here has got a twin. The king in Wamala Tombs, Sekabaka Suna II, has got a twin. So you can say, this is the father of this one. And that's the father of that one who's buried. So already there's evidence they existed.
Of existence, yes.
Yeah. And now with that, the oral history can move with the different clan leaders or the families of the Balangira who were there, or the Katikiro, the last Katikiro of the Kabaka. So these things I'm writing about in a book, but they're so fascinating. Kasubi Tombs, for me, this house is important to many people because of what they see. What's important to me is not the house. What's important to me is the spirit, or moyo.
That spiritual
that's
energy.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a vessel. It's a vehicle. It's a vessel. It's a vehicle. It's just transporting that. So when you come in here right now, you feel the sanity, the spirituality is quiet. You can meditate, because all the processes that have been followed have been correct and with the right people. Yeah.
Okay. I'll later on want to dive deep into like the process. What process have you followed? What materials have you used? But I like to pick particular interest in Amasengere. You brought that up as a term, and when I was talking to, I think it was the Katikiro of this place, he mentioned Masengere as well, but his explanation was not the conference of the mediums, it was the stones out there. What is the linkage between them?
The linkage is the Masengere, the stones, and those are the stones the past elders, the judges, the Kabakas would sit on.
Ah, okay.
When they're discussing. So the term of Masengere is carried through, but the term should be, the real term is Luchiko. It's a meeting, but the Masengere is the setting. And I've been fortunate, I've sat in quite a few, and I've done quite a lot of things actually, which are not conventional. All because, like the pharaohs, the architects who built the pyramids, most of them were buried with the pharaoh. In Buganda, obviously, we have a history, but obviously, I wear that hat now of the builder, the decorator, the builder, and there are things you need to know. When I'm an architect outside, I'm designing a house for you. I need to know your wife. I need to know how many children you have. What time do you eat? What kind of kitchen do you have? There's no way I was going to get involved in this project without knowing the cultural and the history in depth.
Yes.
I had to understand what is involved, because there's a lot of things involved in discussion. Then I realized people are inventing too many things. I had to go for a special course, which took me almost 10 years to understand why is this, who does that, which clan does this. Now we've got issues. You get clans which have got two leaders. One is fake, one is real. Now how do you deal with that? And I think at the end of the day, I ruffled many feathers. Is that why is this so much interested? I think I had to be very much interested because, I'm in charge. I was in charge of really holding this together. Going back to my team, obviously, we had a team of structural engineer, electrical, and all that, quantity surveyor. I was the main. Out of that group, I was the one with the biggest interest in culture. As an architect, because you're the one who's doing you're the master of the whole process. And of course, my colleagues would do that little bit and go away. And but I had to make sure that the right thing is being done. I had to look for records. I had to look for, you can imagine, this building was gutted down. It's a vegetal material building. And we had to reconstruct even the drawings from photographs.
Wow.
And there were some drawings, but they were not correct. So I had to reconstruct the actual drawings from photographs. So I had to prepare the original 1938 model, which got destroyed, and then I had to compare that with the photographs taken of the original 1897, 1911, 1905. So in doing the two, I had to convince, UNESCO was involved as an advisor, but I had to convince UNESCO that I knew what I was doing at the records. So obviously we only had the external photograph of the original model, but we didn't have an internal picture. But we have lots of pictures with the 1938 model. So we had to reconstruct the 1938 model because we had so much information about it. Along the way, I came across the original, one interior shot of the 1897 model, black and white. And I wish I had come across that before, but it was just one shot, black and white, not very clear. So we had all those records. So really, the achievement has been reconstructing, looking for the authenticity. Instead of building is authentic, it's real, of what was there before. And all the internal, obviously we had some guidelines. Some of the destroyed elements, like the columns, the timber columns, they left marks in the ground. So we could position them exactly where they were supposed to go. Also using photographs and GPS. So it's been a very big experience, especially when we were taken off the danger list by UNESCO. That was one of the most emotional and proudest days of my life because in Africa, not many sites, if at all any, have come off the danger list. Once they're destroyed, that's it. That's gone, and this is the first site that's come off. Wow. And we managed to train people, young people. We built capacity. In fact, we're fortunate when the house got destroyed. There was the original Mujirinya, who was a very old man, the decorator, and also Wabula Kayole. Both have died, but we managed to build capacity and have young people who are now experts. So many good things have come out of the bad thing that happened.
Okay, that's interesting, and I'm actually, I guess, really grateful that you've been able to bring together this information that I guess was in so many places and unite it, but also the fact that you've built capacity for the future. And I'd like to now, I guess, get a bit of detail around what materials have you been working with and how easy has it been to find it? Because when I look around this beautiful house, I see a lot of the materials plant-based. And in a world where we are unsustainably consuming, clearing forests, wetlands, how easy is it to access these materials, especially in the kingdom?
That's a big challenge, and I think it's global. When you look at this house, it's not built. This house is woven.
Like
almost
a basket.
80% woven.
Yeah.
And all the materials we're using are materials that have been reclaimed from wetlands, vegetal materials, basically, from the swamps, forests, and specific materials. You just don't pick anything. So it's been a challenge because in the past, Buganda Kingdom, they would get access, these materials would be accessed from within the kingdom. But for instance, now the timber, the muvule, that's the timber we could use on the roof, nothing else, came from Busoga. That's a neighboring kingdom. We have the grass for thatching. That came from Bunyoro, another kingdom. The reeds, those are a mixed bunch from Bunyoro and Buganda. The bark cloth, obviously, that's from, it's been it's a specialized material from Buganda. So other kingdoms are also rebuilding they're going to start rebuilding, they've been inspired. So the thing is, we need to now take into consideration, when we work with the Japanese government, they sent some experts, some 3 architects to look and study what we're doing. And then they asked us, can you take us where you're getting your grass from? That was the beginning. They took them off from Wakiso and PG. They were laughing. They said, is this it? They said, yeah, we're proud. They said, no, in Japan, the equivalent of Ministry of Works, they plant square miles of grass annually
For that purpose.
because they have a lot of thatch structures. So you begin to realize that maybe we lost that. I'm sure in the past we had people in departments that specifically grew these things, but we've lost that in history. And this building, this house, has woken up a lot of the history of building, of building the thatch structures, the cultural structures as well. Also, going back, there's something I missed out. We've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate that most times in such situations, this work is carried out by usually a foreign expert. And even UNESCO architects told me that you're fortunate that you know what you're doing. We're not even involved. The fact is, this being my culture, I took special interest in finding out much more. For instance, in this house where we are, the 3 houses below us, every single house that has been built is on this foundation. When we're excavating, the 3 layers. In excavating, we found so many things I can't go into, But because I understand my culture, I did my research. I got to find out so many things which, okay, are privy to those who need to know them. And so that is also very important that, because it's mine or part of my culture, even if I go to the region, Uganda, it's part of my culture as well. It's easier to tap in and understand what were they doing, or we're doing the wrong thing. So that's also been I would say, a blessing in the reconstruction of this project.
Okay. You mentioned that this house has, if I could say, had alterations throughout the years. You talked about the 1938 model, which I guess is the one that people can remember easily. The one that brought a lot of the modernity, the metallic pillars, the concrete at the bottom. But I'd like to know, during this process of restoring, have you had maybe to substitute some of the materials that weren't easily accessible? And have there been any alterations in light of maybe safety or bringing a bit of, if I could call it, the modernized architecture methods to sustain this house for many more years?
I think all that was done in 1938. What we did, we maintained what was done. And, the only new thing we've installed really smoke detectors in the house. And, and just controlled lighting that is safe. But my challenge has been to rebuild authentically what was destroyed. Obviously, the original house in 1897 was much bigger than this. There wasn't a nail. There wasn't anything. It was just vegetal materials. And I respect the artisans, the Sabawunda, that's the architect, who was around, or who were around in Sekabaka Mutesa, the first reign.
No concrete, no nails.
Nothing. It was just a pure, and that was a wonder how that was done and built. So we've tried not to add anything new, and I think that's one of the things that has kept the authenticity with UNESCO, that we've maintained what was there when the building was inscribed in 2001 by UNESCO.
Okay. Would you say the size of the house, in light of dimensions, width, height, is in tandem with what was there in the 1880s when Sakabaka Mutesa the first set
Yeah,
it
in
up?
1897, I think the house maybe was slightly higher,
Okay.
but the interior. Actually, there's a floor plan of the original before the 1938, but there were lots of columns inside, a lot of timber columns that they had alley passageways leading you to see the Kabaka. That's we've kind of kept as much as possible close to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'd like to ask maybe a bit of a personal question. You've worked on so many projects of national and international repute. I read that you worked on the URA Tower, which is a beautiful work of architecture. I also understand you have some work with MTN, Sheraton, and so many other projects. This, though, is very different from those projects. And the fact that you got this task from the king himself, the Kabaka, the responsibility of restoring the house of his forefathers. How has this project been for you personally? How has it been? Where would you rank it in the projects that you've done?
I think the projects I worked on in my life, I would rate it's different. It's the only one of its type, of its kind. As a model, as a building model globally. So the other jobs I've done, the towers and all that, anybody does them, you find them everywhere. But this one has been more fulfilling in terms of learning more about your own culture, learning more about, it's not been very easy putting it together, and the techniques. And also there's buildings, I always tell people African architecture is about sustainability. We used to build, and once you moved, it was destroyed, but it went into the ground,
to the earth.
Yeah. So everything, all the trends we're talking about now are happening. So our buildings are sustainable. So I've learned a lot about that, and also the lost art of thatching, of the rings and the building, the structural rings, the backcloth. All these have been quite unique. So I gave an example the other day that URA Tower, which is 24 floors, took 3 years to build. This building, this house, has taken us 15. So there is, you begin to understand the complexity. What does it mean to you? Is it another block still? No, the process, the rituals, the experts, all these things add to the spirituality of what we're enjoying now. Yeah.
Fantastic. What would you say took the longest? What part of the process would you say was it the thatching? Was it?
Yeah, the thatching. The thatching, of course, is the clans that need to do it. The thatching, the roof is quite big. You need to procure the grass. When I say procure, you need to go into the field. They need to cut it. The Wabula Coyote, the chief thatcher, has to be there to approve. That one took long, but I think the biggest challenge was getting the roof structure up and getting the structural rings. When you look at one ring, it's got like 12 reeds inside, tied, and then it's tied onto the substructure of the roof, which is also reeds, and then they start putting the grass, and then they tie it again with a string that's made from palm fronds. The whole process is time consuming, and you cannot teach anybody. You cannot go down to town and say, look, can I get somebody who can do this? So that one took almost over maybe a couple of years to do that, And also, you see, you got the ceilings like a dome. How do you measure that dome? How do you follow the center of the building? The center of the building, the ceiling inside is completely different from the center of the roof. They're off each other. But those are things I pick up as an architect, So most people would just look and say, look, that's fair enough, But so the interior has taken us the longest time, and we're still working on it, with the decorations still going on. And we just hope that we get it done as soon as possible to allow people to visit and appreciate the structure.
Okay. The site is the final resting place for 4 great kings of Buganda. And I would like to understand that this is perhaps the most important culture site in the kingdom. You correct me if I'm wrong. What significance would you say the people of Buganda have towards this particular site? Let's give this place the value that it really is. Help us understand what specifically is. Yeah.
I think in 2010, was it March 16th, when the house was gutted, the following day there was uproar, an emotional breakdown, and people coming up and crying, whatever. You ask yourself why. This place, all the other tombs in Buganda Kingdom have got one king, one Kabaka. Kasubi Tombs has got 4 Kabakas. All the other tombs have the jawbone. Kasubi Tombs has the whole body. Okay? Now Kasubi Tombs has got the Kabaka who opened Buganda up to the world, Mutesa, the first, who brought religion, education, whatever. Then you get Mwanga, Sekabaka Daudi Mwanga, Daniel Mwanga, sorry. And he became a Kabaka at a very young age, and he was fighting for his kingdom. Together with the great Omukama of Unyoro, Kabalega Chua too, they were fighting the colonial forces that were coming in. Sekabaka Daudi Mwanga, sorry, Daniel Mwanga, was the Kabaka when the Martyrs issue came. Sekabaka Mwanga was one of the biggest engineering Kabakas. He tried to connect Lake Victoria with his capital, with Kabaka's Lake as a starting ground. Okay? So then Sekabaka Daudi Chua, he became a Kabaka at the age of 3. And his reign was, the majority of his reign was under regents. A lot of change happened in that reign. A lot of power was removed from the Kabaka's hands. And, he's the one who modernized the 1938 model we talk about. Sekabaka Mutesa too, who the Uganda love a lot, was the first president of Uganda.
Yes.
He's buried here. So this place is the alpha of a lot of things that have happened to Buganda and also modern Uganda.
Yes. By modern, you say the
state of Uganda.
The state of Uganda, yes.
These men, especially Mutesa I, were at the forefront of that. So being like a mausoleum or a rallying, it's the heartbeat. It's the heartbeat of the people. This is what really matters to them. So when this house got destroyed, it was so much pain. It was so much grief. It was the emblem. It's what shows this is what Buganda is. And I think that's why they wanted it rebuilt so quickly. And nobody wanted to know. They didn't really care what you're going to do. But deep inside, I knew it couldn't get done so quickly. And fortunately, we've managed to deliver. Unfortunately, a lot of people have died along the way who have not seen this. And but those are the issues you look at to really understand why is it so important. Yeah. I don't think there's another spiritual, there are many spiritual sites in Buganda. But this one is connected to people. Yeah, because of the Kabakas who are in the forest, Muchibira.
Yeah. I know in this series we have a particular discussion on religion and spirituality in particular. Is there any link between the living and the kings that disappeared? Do you have people that still, if I could say, congregate in ceremony here to perhaps whisper their wishes to their God?
Yes, that's they do.
Okay.
I think Kasubi Tombs is like, yin and yang in Chinese. Kasubi Tombs is about death. It's about spirits. If you're dealing with Buganda culture, you're dealing with ghosts. You're dealing with mayembe, fetishes. You're dealing with so many other things in the dark. You've got Mukasa, who gives. You got Walumbe, who takes the black and the white. When you enter this room, this Kasubi Tombs is divided in two. The Bawenda and the Basimbiri. Now when I say Bawenda and Basimbiri, these are the two houses, the different kabakas, because there's more than one here. So the wives, there's ladies you see, she cannot cross from there to this side if she has to be on that side.
Why? Why is that?
Because, you know, the Wuko, they can't. Yeah, you see? And each king buried cannot be next to his son.
Yes.
Are you with me? So all the things, when you put them together, the complexity of the intangible culture is more important, as I mentioned. This is a vessel for everybody to look at, but it's not important to me. What's important to me is the intangible culture that keeps me awake the whole night, you know, trying to understand, you know. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Now, in most palaces, the king, when he's alive in his palace, the fireplace is at the gate at Wankachi. They call it Wankachi. The fireplace is called a choto. When the king passes on, the fireplace moves inside to keep him warm. Here we have a big fireplace outside because of the four kings. Yeah. So it's not easy to explain in a few minutes, all the whatever. But the issue of black and white, living and the dead, is the biggest player here. It's the biggest thing that drives everybody around here.
Okay, and I guess that's perhaps what interested UNESCO in making this place.
For UNESCO, it was really okay. The architecture is one, the intangible aspects of the project is another one. It's the two, you know, what you see and what you don't see. Yeah.
Okay. What message would you have for people who? I would understand the frustration that people wanted this work done so quickly. They wanted the site to be up as fast as possible. But I understand the challenge, not just from a financial point, but also, as you've explained, the spiritual energy that needs to be in place for this house to be worthy of not just one king, but the four great kings that disappeared. What message would you have for people who, I guess, were a bit uncomfortable by the 15-year period?
Well, the message, okay, I can give you a story. People used to talk and complain. When they came here, I would always tell them, go and look, and I'll stay outside. And they'll all come outside and just shake my hand.
Yeah.
When you come and look at the work, you don't talk anymore. But the message is, if we had the information I have now, 10 years ago, would have finished this house in 2 years. Yeah. But there's nothing. We had to look for everything. Yeah.
Okay. That's self-explanatory.
Yeah.
You weren't really working with blueprints.
No, this was investigation. You can't invent anything, you know, and of course everybody comes with an idea. You have to be strong. I have to be very strong as an architect. Everybody will come here, do this, put that, do this, and you keep quiet, you know. And then sometimes you put your foot down and say no, and you're a bad guy, but which is fine. Now the same people are like, wow, it's okay.
You get a handshake.
Yeah, well, maybe a golden handshake, but yeah.
Okay, just as we head towards the end of the discussion, I'm interested in knowing, of course, I know you've learned a great deal through this restoration process. I'd like to pick your mind in 2025, the context of where we are at the moment. What qualifies to be a cultural landmark? When I read about heritage, I understand it evolves over time. What would you say in the current state would qualify a site to be a cultural landmark?
I think obviously a site that affects the community, that safeguards the community's culture, and a site that's iconic, you know. You look at Australia, they have the Uluru Rock where the Aborigines, now they've stopped people from climbing it. It's a cultural landmark. It's visible. And, you know, it connects the people to their culture and to the earth. So, yeah, cultural landmark, that's what it is, you know. It has to affect the culture it's in. It has to really change. It has to be something that's connecting and bringing people together. Yeah.
Then I also would like to know, on a continent that is rich in culture like the African continent, where you have incredible works of man, creativity and ingenuity. Places like Great Zimbabwe in Zimbabwe. You have the pyramids in Egypt. You have Lalibela in Ethiopia. There's that church up in the mountains. I think it's also in Ethiopia as well. Where would you rank a site like Kasubi?
So all the sites are different, different materials, different meaning, different origins. I'd say Kasubi, in terms of its people, in terms of what it does, I'll put it in the top 3.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll put it in the top 3 because what makes Kasubi different from the Great House of Zimbabwe or the pyramids is this is connected to the people. Everything is connected to the past and to the contemporary culture. And I mean, West Africa's got many as well, but I think, I'm not being biased, but it's just, it's actually like in Japan, you get the shrines of Ise. They rebuild them every 20 years. They also they build the two of the same. So when they're rebuilding one is already there. So they don't lose the capacity of to rebuild. Fortunately, I mean, what does Kasubi Tomb stand for? What does the house stand for? What does it mean for its people? I was asked a question once by a colleague of mine, a European architect, and said, look, how many architects have designed a building that talks about their culture, that defines their culture or their nation?
Not everyone gets to do that.
So it's politically and socially that powerful as a structure. It says a lot without saying anything. When you look at it, initially it looks like a simple structure. When you start dissecting the different facets of it, the different layers, it is a bigger building than it looks. And maybe that's what it's supposed to be. To say more by being modest.
Yeah. Wow. Very well said. And I must commend you for the really beautiful work that you've done. Just as we look forward, you mentioned that you are writing a book. But I also understand that there are several other, if I could call them historical sites, culture sites, not just in the Buganda Kingdom, but also beyond this great kingdom that I guess need restoration. Have you?
Yes.
Do you pick interest in any of those?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've taken a big interest in the Bunyoro Kingdom, for instance. I've taken interest in Igasani of Kawalegachwa too. I've taken interest in actually a lot of Gasani for the Abakama in the Bunyoro Kingdom. And some of them in Buganda, because Bunyoro used to stretch as far as Buganda. There's Nsingo, or Mukama, is it Rukidi? I don't know, I've got the name now. Who fought Nachibingi, Kabaka Nachibingi, and killed him, the battles of Sese, Chibuka. Tora's got quite a few. The north, the Acholi, Tororo in the east, you see, people don't know what they have. That's the problem. And also, we, the children who are born in independence, we didn't care. But now, because we've lost so much of what defined us, now we want to grab. But in the problem of grabbing, people are inventing what was not there. So Buganda and Bunyoro is easy to link. If you link to Bunyoro, then Toro is easier to link with Bunyoro. Then of course from there you can start. But you look at the different dynasties. You look at the Batembuzi dynasty, the Bachwezi dynasty, and the Babicho dynasty. The Babicho dynasty, which gave birth to all the kingdoms that are there now, came from the Bachwezi, And of course those, you got the Bigobi Amgenyi. You got the Nkakumira went to the Orukurato, Rabachwezi, the last Orukurato of Bachwezi. It's a cave we used to meet. So I look at all this, like a landscape site. I look at all this and I say, but what are we doing? The story of this region and beyond Uganda, modern Uganda, is everywhere. But we need scholars, we need financing to really indulge. When you look at other countries, other civilizations, if you go to Europe, there's money that's given to people to research. But even if it's there, but how much do you get? And who's doing the research? How much interest do they have in what they're doing? So all these things are quite challenging right now. But I think if we can get this off the ground and move on to Bunyoro, Kabalega's tomb, fantastic. We can at least start breaking the doors. If you go to Sese Islands, it's got plenty of shrines that are connected to Buganda and Bunyoro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's need to conserve all of those and restore.
Yeah, I'm writing actually a paper. I'm presenting a paper in a couple of months in New York regarding these historic linkages and what we need to do to research, getting funding and all that. You need to be serious, and you need to know the proper archaeologists, the proper architects, proper. Of course, everything of ours is oral storytelling. You need to tell the story. Yeah.
Fantastic. Let me just ask two more questions. One being that in my discussion with one of the guides in this series, he mentioned that this palace stretched towards or as far as the Makerere University gate, Namirembe, Nansana, it was huge.
Yeah.
But right now you sit on, I think it's 64 acres.
Yeah, 64 acres.
What does the future look like in terms of a historical site like this that is in, if I could say, it's actually when you look at the Google Map image of this place, it's like a patch of green surrounded by huge modernity around it.
Yeah, I think
does that worry you?
It worries, but I would say now that we're very much aware, the pressure, the densification around Kasubi is immense.
Yeah.
And that's why they built the wall around it. People encroach, and they do. So right now the plan is to leave half a kilometer around Kasubi tombs and designate those properties as historic properties. Have local restaurants for tourists, coffee shops, So when they come in, they stick around, But you don't. You limit the city council to approve high-rise buildings looking inside the tomb. That is one of the issues. And I think, yes, I mean, if you look inside Kasubi, if I had my way, I would rebuild the old houses that were inside here, because I've got some of the idea of the drawings of the houses that were here. This was just one. It was Zalampanga, then it was Twekobe, where the Kabaka was. So I think this was more or less where the Kabaka received guests. Yeah. And this faced the Wankachi, the main gate. And then outside the gate, you had the Katikiro, the other ministers, the clan leaders. They all kind of stayed there, going down to Rubigi. As part of, it was a big complex. It was called a Chibuga.
Yeah.
And this courtyard is called a Mbuga. So when they were Sebakwisi Mbuga, they've called you to Mbuga, you're going to see the king. So actually, in Luganda, there's word Chibuga. We don't get it in other languages, which means a city or urban.
Yes, city, yeah.
Urbanity. So these guys had urbanity before. They would plan streets. The streets in Buganda were 30 meters wide with reeds on either side. All roads led to Rome. All roads led to Chibuga.
We have plenty to learn from what.
So there is a lot. In fact, when the first missionaries came, they were like 30 meters wide road of Maram with reeds on either side and with houses behind and matoke plantations. And you're walking towards to see the king. People used to come to, when they arrived in Mombasa, they come into Buganda to see Mutesa. You had to go through a series of roadblocks, different places, until you reached Busoga. That was the final place. And then the guys would cross the river and they run all the way saying, so-and-so's come to see Kabaka. Then they will allow you to come in. Yeah. So that's the planning, the city, the Chibuga, and also the power that Mutesa one had and respect. That's what really created that aura as well for them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated about Africa. You call it what? African civilizations back then. Just listening to you, my jaw drops.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe just finally, this segment carries us into a particular segment on tourism and conservation.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask our final question. Tourism is usually a double-edged sword. Yes, it brings in the revenue that helps us develop and conserve. But I understand in several tourism destinations around the world, there's a bit of pressure. Do you feel that as perhaps a potential threat to a site like Kasubi?
Yeah, I think it's a threat.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we need the money, but it's a threat because I think Kasubi is going to become busier when it's officially opened.
Yeah.
And, the people who stay here, who live here, will begin to feel the pressure.
Yeah.
They might be getting income, but of course, tourism, it's just double-edged, as you put it. You need it. But of course, how far? Like in Venice, now they have to pay to go. They limit the number of tourism to Venice, but it's also builds up. It builds up and puts onto the map, gives your culture visibility. So I think we just also need to develop more the sites which link Kasubi to other sites in Buganda and out of Buganda as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for speaking to us,
Thank
Mr.
you very much.
Jonathan.
Thank you.
And yeah, I must reiterate and also congratulate you on the beautiful work that your team
Thank you
and
very
yourself
much.
have done.
Thank you very much.
Coming up in our 7-part series on the history of the Great Kingdom of Buganda.
In Mutesa's original words, he was fond of saying like, my country, ensi yange efuse muyunganda.
I don't know what that means.
Muyunga is like a joint of wombs. My country has become a joint of wombs. Now I've brought people from different parts of the country. They have now come together to join my country. So that's where maybe the name Uganda comes from when we compare. Yeah, so this gentleman had 84 official wives and over 127 children. Yeah, in Buganda Kingdom, we have that belief that every woman belongs to the king.